Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Rosie and if you are new here, please do subscribe. So in this video, I'm going to be talking you through the 11 things I wish I'd knew before I started photography. So these are things that I've learned over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, and it's things that I wish I'd known right at the beginning that would really help me out up until now. So I'm hoping that by sharing these things, it will really help you out with your photography journey and with your skills as well. So the first thing I would recommend is to set your white balance or set your Kelvin. So the white balance and Kelvin is the same thing, it's just different words for the same thing. And Kelvin is actually the standard international unit of measurement for thermodynamic temperature. So when I first started, I used auto white balance, auto settings, auto focus, auto everything. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just knew that I would love photography. And I would go on a photo shoot and I would take lots of photographs, get home and try and edit them. And some of them would be warm and some of them would be cool and some of them would be different, just completely different temperatures depending on where I was shooting, if I was in the shade or in the sun. Obviously my camera was doing the best job it could at sorting out the white balance, but it just meant that there was no consistency at all in terms of the temperature of the photographs. So when it then came to editing, it was a real nightmare trying to get everything to match up and for the whole gallery to look the same. So something I would really recommend is to set your Kelvin on your camera. You can do this by googling your camera body online. Just on Google, you just type in your camera body and Kelvin settings or auto or white balance settings, and you'll be able to find there exactly how to do it. I think the actual settings doesn't matter a whole lot. I think you can get super into your Kelvin settings if you want to, but if you're a beginner, I would just put them at just the middle, right down the middle. I can't remember what they are. I'll pop them on screen somewhere so you can see what I mean. Put them right down there in the middle so that every single photograph you take is set to the same white balance. This just makes editing a whole lot easier. I can't tell you how many times I have half my photographs super warm and half my photographs super cool, depending on where we were during the photo shoot, and it makes it so hard for editing. So that is number 1, is to set your Kelvin. So my tip number 2 is that editing is everything. I know that when I first started, I would only edit slightly. I would kind of increase the exposure, the contrast, maybe pull down the highlights and blacks, things like that a tiny bit. But that was kind of all I did, and it took me a couple of years to figure out that I could really change the photograph depending on, the colours and the tone curve, split toning, all these different things, gradients, all the different tools on Lightroom. It took me quite a while to realise that I could make the photograph exactly how I wanted by using all of these settings. And that doesn't mean you have to do extreme crazy editing, it just means that you can make the greens a nicer shade of green, or you can make the blues a little bit more turquoisey, or you can make the yellows less brash. You can just change the photograph completely. And I'm not talking about crazy like before and afters where it doesn't even look like the same photograph. I just mean nice edits where you can really change the photograph but to convey a certain meaning. This is super important for all photography, from studio, from portraits, weddings, babies, maternity, proposals, families, bachelorettes, everything. Good editing is key, and it can really change a photograph. I might pop some before and afters on here so you can see what I'm talking about, some of my before and afters, just to show you how important editing is and how it can really bring a photograph to life. So really make sure that you do learn Lightroom or your preferred editing software. I do use Lightroom, I think it's the best. So make sure that you really learn it, you really play about with it, you really push different boundaries and experiment, and every time you do a photo shoot, try and do something different and try and use a different setting, use a different tab on Lightroom so that you really get to learn and you get to see what happens when you move all the different sliders around. That would be my second piece of advice. The next one is to make sure that you shoot in RAW. I know that when I first started I didn't really understand RAW and JPEG, so I think I shot in RAW, but it was not on purpose at all. I don't know, I must have watched a YouTube video somewhere and just did it without really thinking about it. But honestly, if you shoot in JPEG, please shoot in RAW. The reason is the amount that you can change a photograph compared to from JPEG to RAW is crazy. In terms of the colours, the shadows, the highlights, everything, there's just so much more detail and information in RAW photographs, which means that you can really push the editing, whereas JPEGs is less information, which means that you can only do the kind of bare minimal, really. You can only change the colours slightly, you can change the settings slightly, but shooting in RAW means that you can just have full creativity with it and you can just do whatever you want. So really try and shoot in RAW. Again, just go on Google, search for your camera and just put, whatever the camera is, how to set the camera in RAW, and you'll be able to find the information there. And honestly, it's the best piece of advice, make sure you shoot in RAW. So the next one is to get to know your equipment. So this is super important if you're on a photo shoot and you want to change the shutter speed or ISO or the f-stop, the aperture. Make sure that you know your camera inside out. Make sure you know how to delete photographs, make sure you know how to scroll through them, make sure you know how to check your highlights and all these different things. Just make sure you really know your equipment, because I've been on photo shoots before and panic sets in when you're like, oh my god, it's all coming out blurry, I need to change my shutter speed, but then you don't know how to change your shutter speed because you haven't, just bought the camera, you want to test it out and you haven't figured it out yet, and you're stuck there with a client or with, a free shoot or whatever, and you can't do it, and you have to kind of get your phone out and Google, and it just looks awful. So my main advice is to really spend hours and hours and hours learning how to use your camera, even if you're in the kitchen photographing rice. Like, it doesn't have to be a big shoot, but just, make sure that you know how to change the settings, make sure you know how to check the photographs, make sure you can zoom in so you can check that the focus is working properly, make sure you can, just make sure you know your camera, basically, is my, fourth piece of advice. You really need to know your equipment inside out and know what you can do with it as well. I feel like once you know your camera, you can know how far you can push it or how far you can, what it's capable of, basically. So know your equipment. So the next one is that autofocus is your best friend. I know that when I first started, I thought that autofocus and auto settings were the same thing. And I knew that everyone shot in manual and I had to shoot in manual, and manual. That's all you get told all the time about photography, shoot in manual, which is going to be my next point. But I know that I thought that meant I had to shoot manual focus. Don't even bother. Honestly, it's like, unless you're doing fancy camera tricks with video, or maybe you're doing certain things, maybe you might want to use manual focus, but otherwise autofocus is your best friend. Everybody uses autofocus, everyone in the industry, professionals use it. I've been on shoots with wedding photographers, they all shoot with autofocus. Obviously you have to have the thing where you, what's it called? The thing where you decide where it's going to focus, so not just anywhere, you need to decide where you focus, but make sure that the camera is the one that's focusing, not you with the focus ring, because you're never going to get, it'll just take too long and you're probably not going to get it crisp on focus anyway. So yeah, don't be afraid to use autofocus. Everybody does it. It's the best thing in the world. There's no shade, there's no oh, you're not a professional if you don't shoot manual focus. No one shoots manual focus, no one. So autofocus is your best friend. Don't try and learn manual unless you need to. Unless you want to, then fine, but otherwise, yeah, autofocus. So my next point is to learn manual, and this means knowing your aperture, shutter speed and ISO. Now this took me years to figure out. It just, for some reason, it just didn't make sense in my brain. And I know that whenever I looked at, trying to figure it out and learn about it, I always saw the triangle, and again, that just didn't make sense to me. I think the way that I learn was just by finding random settings online. I'd Google outdoor photography session settings, camera settings. I'd put that on, go outside, try and take photographs of a tree, for example, and I'd think, okay, so what happens if I change the aperture? And then, okay, that's gone a bit dark, so now what happens if I change the shutter speed? Oh, that's even darker. Okay, so what happens if I change the ISO? Oh, that's better. So I'd really spent a lot of time analysing what I was doing and playing with the settings and just trying to go from there. But I think one of the main things to know is to, once you understand the concept of manual and how the three of those interact with each other, the thing then is to figure out the right settings for certain situations and kind of have that in your mind, just so that when you go to a shoot, okay, I'm going to start off with, okay, so if I'm outside in the middle of the day, I need ISO 100, I want my f-stop to be 5, and I want my shutter speed to be 250. So just think that, okay, automatically I want to start there. If it's too bright, okay, I'll bump the shutter speed up a bit, or okay, I'll do this or move that or the other. It's good to kind of have certain settings for certain occasions or locations in mind, so that when you get to a shoot, you can have your settings, already in your camera, ready to go. Do a couple of test shots, change a couple of things, and you're already there. Rather than get in there and your settings are completely way off and you have to spend ages trying to figure out the settings. I know that I went to a couple of shoots when I was shooting manual, when I first started shooting manual, and it was so hard trying to look professional with the clients, whilst also in the back of my head just going, oh my god, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do this, what settings do I need? So just try and get the basics of understanding how these three change each other, and then try and get a couple of settings. So okay, if I'm shooting indoors, it's probably going to be this, or if I'm shooting in the shade, it's probably going to be this, or if I'm shooting in the sunshine, it's probably going to be this. Try and have certain settings. I actually used to write them down on my phone, so I'd have like indoor shoot would be this, outdoor shoot would be this, shade would be this, so that if I had a shoot that was like out on the beach, okay, well I'd go to my phone, okay, I'll put these in, and then when I get there, I'll see what it's like and adjust and go from there. Now I kind of have it all in my head because I've kind of got experience with it all, so I can just figure it out in my head, like, okay, well, what settings do I need for this lighting situation? But at the beginning, that's definitely what I did, was wrote down settings on my phone, put it on my camera, got there, and tried to figure it out from there. So yeah, make sure you try and shoot in manual. It really is worth doing, especially because I feel like with automatic settings, when I first started photography, I would go and do a photo shoot, and I would really want, for example, the flower at the front to be blurry and the person in the background to be in focus. I would take photographs and my camera would just put it at like f22, so everything was in focus. I just couldn't understand why I couldn't get the photographs that I wanted. And that's the thing with shooting manual, is that once you learn that, you can really do exactly what you want. You can make certain things in focus, certain things brighter or darker, or you have full creative control. Whereas if you shoot in auto, you just have to rely on your camera and whatever your camera decides to give you for that shoot, basically. So shooting in manual is so important. I know it's hard, I know it takes time to understand it all, but as soon as you get that in your belt, you're good to go. Now, even though I've just said you need to shoot in manual, I will also say that I know a couple of photographers that shoot in Aperture Priority Mode or Shutter Speed Priority Mode, depending on the shot that they're trying to get. But I worked with a wedding photographer for a while, and she shot mostly in Aperture Priority, so she would put the Aperture Priority down to 1.8, I think she had, or yeah, I think it was 1.8, and then auto ISO and auto shutter speed. So that just means that you're deciding the f-stop, and your camera does the rest to make sure it's well exposed. So this is also a little sneaky trick that photographers do. All photographers say shoot in manual, but then actually there are people that shoot in Aperture Priority or shutter speed. So just have a play with those as well. It's, I think as long as you have some sort of control of your camera, that's the best thing to do. So I know that with manual, you can put the aperture to a certain thing, then you have to figure out, okay, well, if I've done that to that, what settings do I need for these other two to make the photograph properly exposed? Whereas if you just go into Aperture Priority, set your settings, take a photograph, and automatically your camera will get the right exposure for you while you're getting the f-stop that you wanted. So yeah, don't be afraid to play about with those as well. You don't have to always shoot in manual. I honestly do. I don't ever go in Aperture Priority or shutter speed, but I know that people do. I know that, for example, for weddings, people shoot a lot in just Aperture Priority because it's just easier, because you're going from shooting this direction, that direction, inside, outside, sun, not sun. So try and make your life easier, and Aperture Priority is one of the easiest settings to get started with. Although I wouldn't just rest on that, I wouldn't just use that. I learnt manual and then I've played about with aperture once I understand it all, but I think that if you rely just on Aperture Priority Mode and not learn the manual, you might then be stuck with certain situations. So manual is definitely important, but you can also play about with the other settings as well, the Aperture Priority, for example. So the next piece of advice is to shoot for free. Now, I know this is very controversial, and especially in the photography world, there's two completely different sides of this. Some people say shoot for free, like I do, shoot for free, get experience, build your portfolio, learn your photography, learn your craft, and then once you're good enough, then you can start charging. And then there's other people who say you should never shoot for free because you're taking the job away from somebody who would have earned money from that paid shoot, and you should always charge at least 50 quid because otherwise you're making, otherwise people are always going to find a free photographer, which I understand, but honestly, I mean, I can't tell you anything other than what I did, and that's what I did, and I think it worked well for me. It was to work for free, basically. I don't know how many shoots for free, a lot of shoots for free, but I had to do that to learn and now be able to charge what I charge, because I don't know, I just don't think I would feel comfortable. I mean, I guess I did it though. I was going to say I wouldn't feel comfortable charging people without fully knowing what I was doing, but I think I did that right at the beginning anyway. But definitely try and shoot for free, try and photograph friends, family, objects in the house, your back garden, anything really, just to kind of learn the settings. That's the main thing. And then when you feel comfortable to charge, that's when I charged. Yeah, don't be afraid to shoot for free. I know that, like I said, there is two sides to this. There's people with very, very strong opinions on both sides. Do what works best for you, but I did a lot of shoots for free and it really helped me out. So my next piece of advice is to buy a good lens, and even though you could spend all the money in the world on a good camera, if you have a crappy lens, you're going to have crappy photographs. That's probably not true, that's probably a little bit unfair, but I spent around $800 on my lens. I got the Tamron 24-70 f2.8, and I bought this maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it hasn't come off my camera since. I've bought a wide angle lens, I didn't really use it. I've bought a 50mm lens, I didn't really use it. I literally only use this one lens because it is so good. It was expensive. I know it's not expensive as the Nikon or the Canon, but it was expensive for me at the time. $800 for a lens was crazy, and I was like, oh my god, I'm spending this much money on the lens. Am I being crazy? Is it worth it? Am I going to use it? Am I going to enjoy it? But I think if you do lots and lots of research and find something that's going to work for you, that's the best thing to do. Just find one lens that is perfect rather than having lots of different lenses that don't really do what you want them to do. And the reason I got the 24-70 is because a couple of reasons. I was doing a lot of different shoots, so I wanted to be able to stand far away and be able to get a good shot, but then also be able to stand far away and zoom in and get a good shot. I did a couple of weddings. I wasn't sure if I was going to go into weddings or not, so I wanted something that could zoom in quite a good distance as well. It's just the most versatile lens, and also the fact that it's 2.8 f-stop from 24 all the way to 70 is amazing, because a lot of zoom lenses, you'll have a look, they go from maybe 2.8 to 5.6, for example, which means that the more that you zoom in, the lower the aperture, the higher the f-stop number, if that makes sense. So it's not that it's less quality, it's just that you don't get that nice blurry background. Whereas with this one, the 2.8, if you're at 24mm, it's 2.8. If you zoom into 70, it's 2.8. So that is a really, really great lens. I'd really recommend that. If you're thinking about getting into weddings, and if you would like a different lens for more zoomed in shots, I'd recommend the 70-200. I have never used it and I have never bought it, but it's like my dream lens, and it costs like $2,000. So maybe one day, I think if I'd have gotten into weddings, I would have invested in that. Again, the 70-200, I think it's with the f2.8 as well, maybe f2. There's a couple of different options, but I would highly, highly recommend you spend a lot of money on the lens, because the lens is basically everything. Obviously having a good camera is good as well, but the lens is super important basically. So yeah, invest in a good lens, also invest in a good camera. I got the Nikon D500, and I got this because it's got 10 frames per second, and that was the selling point for me. It's not full frame, it's crop sensor, and I was hesitating between the 550. I was hesitating between the D500 and the D750. Ended up going for this one because it's got 10 frames per second, which means that if I'm shooting children or dogs or people jumping or running or anything like that, you can press it down and it's super, super quick. So that's what convinced me to get this camera. Now thinking about it, maybe I should have or could have gone for the D750 because it was cheaper and it's full frame. I've never actually shot a full frame before, so that myth about you have to shoot full frame, you don't. I'm a photographer, I have been for 4 years, and I've always shot on crop sensor, so don't feel the need to get a full frame if you don't want to. Just get whatever's good for you, but I thought the high frame rate was good and the lens was super important as well. So my next piece of advice is to learn how to pose people. I spent a lot of time on Pinterest on my phone actually, saving lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of photographs to different boards, just to kind of be in that world and to surround myself and to see a lot of those images so that I could see what I liked and what I didn't like within certain photographs. And also even now actually, before a photo shoot, so if for example I have a mother and daughter shoot or a proposal or a bachelorette party or whatever it is, I will spend some time on Pinterest searching for that style photo shoot and save it to a board. And this just means that on the way to, so I'll do that for maybe 2 weeks before the shoot, and that just means that on the way to the shoot I'll sit in my taxi and go on Pinterest and look at all the photographs that I've saved and just look at the poses, look at what they're doing, think about the angles and the compositions and just different ways that you can move the body and get people to interact with each other. So that is something I'd recommend doing, is to save photographs on Pinterest and create a board for each style photo shoot, if that makes sense. Study them, look at them, follow other photographers on Instagram as well. Make sure that you're, you know, constantly feeling inspired and getting, just kind of being in that world of great photography, great posing, great lighting, great everything. The more that you see it, the more that you'll appreciate it, and the more you'll understand it as well, the more that it'll kind of sink into your brain and think, oh, actually, if I pose somebody this way, that looks more natural than posing them that way. And that's something else I actually want to point out, is that posing can be, it can be hard, but people do it really differently. Like I said, I worked with this wedding photographer. She would pose the models so well, but it was so kind of awkward almost, like she'd get the people to stand in such awkward positions, and it would look beautiful in the photographs, but you could tell that the people weren't comfortable. That is not my jam at all. I'm all about comfort, natural, just chilling out basically. So if you're gonna sit, how would you naturally sit on the floor and sit on the floor and I take a photograph? That's more my style of posing. I do give prompts. I do, you know, encourage people to move in certain ways and put arms in different places. So you need to learn how to be kind of confident enough to direct people with their posing. So if they have, I don't know, I think you'll learn, but just surround yourself with lots of photographs and be directive enough and confident enough to say to somebody, actually put your arm down here, or actually move that here, or put your leg there, or put your foot here, or stand back there, to the right, to the left. Make sure that you're confident enough to do that, to direct your clients so that you get the best photographs that you can basically. And my last piece of advice is to know your worth. Now, this has taken me a while to learn. Like I said, I did a lot of free shoots, and when I first moved to Miami 2.5 years ago, I started in the photography thing, and I would kind of make up a price and send that to people, and they'd be like, oh, you know, like if it was a couple photo shoot, I'd say, okay, that's $150 for an hour shoot. They'd say, oh, we were hoping for something more around the $50 mark, and I'd say, oh, okay, I'll do that. So I'd go and do a shoot for $50 for an hour, which, bear in mind, it would cost me maybe $30 in taxis. An hour shoot, which then would sometimes turn into 2 hours because I'd be too nice and just carry on without being like, no, it's been an hour, I'm done, thanks, bye. And then obviously hours of editing, and then putting it online and sharing and all the rest of it, and all the conversations that come before the shoot as well, that's also added into the time. So I definitely did a lot of free work and a lot of cheap work and a lot of, you know, things I shouldn't have done. But I've definitely learned from it, so I'm here to teach you, don't do that. Obviously, like I said, work for free if it's going to benefit you. If you're like, oh, I'm dying to photograph a couple, get your friends and photograph them for free. They've got nice photographs and you've got nice photographs for your portfolio. But only work for free if it works for you. I spent a long time photographing this guy who was super into like gothic photography. He was kind of a gothic guy, so I would take photographs and edit them, and then he would edit the crap out of them and make them super dark and super gothic and super like gory, and I don't know, just not my style. And I worked with him, I don't know, multiple times, 6 maybe more shoots that I did for him for free. It didn't help me at all, it didn't get me any jobs, it didn't benefit me at all, but he was just taking me for a free ride basically. He was just getting the most out of it, and he just kept going, and I was just too nice to say no, until eventually I was like, do you know what, no, I'm done with this. It's not bringing any value to me at all, I'm not learning from it, so no, I'm done. So shoot for free if you want to, and if it's really going to help you and your business. But then once you feel like you know your photography and you know your skill, then is the time to know your worth. So make sure that if you do an hour shoot, make sure that you're charging enough money to get what you want out of it, including your travel, including the, you know, Uber service, including your time editing, including everything. Make sure that you're charging the amount of money that you want to receive and know your worth. I've recently been in contact with a couple of people for some yoga shoots. I told them my price, I said it's too expensive, and I just said, okay, that's fine. Find somebody who is in your price range, because there's always going to be photographers who are learning who will charge $50 or who will do it for free. I've been there and done that. I don't want to do it anymore. So now I charge what I charge, and I'm very happy charging that. And if people don't want to pay it, that's fine. Find somebody else. It's not worth my time or energy to spend 10 hours in total doing a shoot for free or for $50. Like, I know my worth now, and once you get to that point, that's amazing. Once you know, I know I'm good at photography, I know I'm good at editing, I know I'm good at posing, I know I'm good at directing, I know I'm good at all the different aspects of photography. Once you get to that point and you know your worth and you know that you're good at what you do, that's the best feeling, because you can charge what you want, and if people don't want to pay it, fine, don't pay it, find somebody else. But you will find people that will pay it, and they're your clients, they're the most ideal clients. So once you get to that point, that's amazing, and that's where you want to be. So with all that being said, photography is fun. Have fun with it. Just learn as much as you can, you know, just be creative and explore, have fun, make friends. You know, it should be a good thing to do. It should be good fun. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you learned something from this little video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up and share it with somebody else who might find it interesting. Maybe someone, you know, a fellow friend who is also wanting to be a photographer, share it with them. Let them know, let's share the information, let's help each other out here, and subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!